Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Keramo wash processed Ethiopia from Banibeans Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Banibeans, based out of Ljubljana, Slovenia. And once again, they were a suggestion to us by Ljubljana. So once again, a shout out to and thank you to Ljubljana for the suggestion. This coffee did feature in a recent blind taste test rankings video, where it finished second place out of 4 Banibeans coffees on that day. And going into these Banibeans reviews, this is the coffee from them that I expected to enjoy the most, as it's the one that's the most my profile sort of coffee. So we'll see if it did end up being my favorite, as this right here is day 45. And recipe we went with for this coffee was pushing this one a little bit at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I also like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind roast profile for this coffee. While it is in line with the other Banibeans coffees that we're going to be discussing, this one did feel ever so slightly lighter than those other ones. Even then, this is still a light coffee by most standards and metrics, if not necessarily an overly light coffee. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 20 first impression and the blind taste test day. And this one also came out classically washed Ethiopian with a notable delicacy to the cup, a slight florality, citrus, as well as a bit of fresh fruit as well. The citrus does open up as it cools down with plenty of the tea-like characteristics. So a mostly positive start. A lot of what you'd expect from a wash processed Ethiopian coffee. We're going to try to see if we could discover more from this one, as on day 23 we opted for the Chemex, and it continues to offer an abundance of those classic Ethiopian characteristics, mostly in the citric direction with some additional soft melon attributes as well. A surprising bit of a lingering finish to it with a candied attribute, so a solid second impression as well. We continue on to day 26 as we opted for the April brewer, and it really smells wonderful in the brew itself, as it does have a nice, fresh, and delicate feel to the cup. There is a hidden lingering melon fruit as well before it settles into a soft lemon candy with a slight bit of sweetness on the back end. Tea-like savoriness as well to the cup, with a pretty mostly straightforward Ethiopian characteristic cup nonetheless. We continue on to day 29 as we opted for the V60 with a more fine grind and higher temperatures, and this did have a slight bit more intensity to it as it focuses a little bit more on the floral honey-like aspect to it with a slightly bitter sense as well. And that's a theme I found from Banibeans coffees as of this moment, is those two coffees, the washed coffees that we've had, have also had that ever so slightly bitter florality to them, which is interesting to me. Oftentimes when you find themes like that, I feel like it has a lot to do with the roaster itself. And then it continues to focus on the citric attributes with a slight savoriness to it. So day 29, interesting results. Day 32, through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and this is actually the best that it's been up to this point, as there's a little bit of a trade-off in terms of the intensity as well as the fresh fruit aspects, with also a very slight graining quality. And I said, given that I was getting a little bit more of those fresh fruit qualities to it, I can kind of make that trade-off, as there's a melon and subtle peachiness that I've experienced for the first time in this coffee. On some earlier days, I could say maybe it was lingering very far in the background, but on this day, I could say it was a little bit more pronounced and defined within the cup itself, with a lemon candy once again, and some of these slightly bitter floral honey too. So a little bit more depth in this cup and just a little bit more to experience. We continue on to day 35 as we opted for the V60 one more time, and the cup feels like it's naturally improving with time. So this one right here, I feel like just letting it rest did seem to do it a lot of improvement, as this at this moment felt like possibly the best cup I'd experienced, as there's a slight bit more sweetness and some focus on the delicate florality. A little less defined of what I would say is a honeysuckle-like aspect to complement that lemon candy quality. So once again, picking out new things from this coffee here on this day 35 mark. Day 38, another try through the Chemex with these same adjustments, and it continues to feel like it's trending in a very positive direction, as there's an increased intensity to the fruit aspects with much more of the soft melon as well as peachiness again, plenty of citrus, and a sweeter honeysuckle-like florality, possibly the best I had experienced, though on day 41. It continued to remain pretty similar as the best of this one continues to be present as the cup cools down with plenty of the melon-like attributes, delicate citrus, slight peachiness, and plenty of tea-like savoriness as well. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and we have a lot of level 4s, so let's go through those real quick. And we'll start with the cleanliness level 4. So yes, this is the first coffee that we're discussing from Banibeans that did reach that level 4 mark, but this one had no doubt about it, as it's at that true level 4 where there's nothing that I could necessarily knock it for in any sense. Very clean cup of coffee, a lot of what you'd expect from a wash-processed Ethiopian coffee. Finish, level 4. And at times, washed Ethiopian coffees can be a little tame, a little boring, and they might not necessarily have the most long-lasting finish. This one, though, given that it came in a very fresh fruit sense, was really enjoyable for me. So level 4 is a nice fit. At times, maybe a little heavy on the citric attributes, but that's being a little nitpicky. Sweetness, level 4. I do have to say, I did not necessarily expect this one to reach that level 4 based off some of the earlier impressions I had had of it, but towards the end with some adjustments and with the coffee just kind of naturally improving over time, level 4 did seem very justified within this coffee, and once again, I was making it alongside some of their other coffees, so level 4 definitely seems fitting for this one. Acidity, level 4. And that's another one of these themes that I'm noticing from Banibeans, is that their coffees continue to remain on the more acidic side of things, as all of the coffees we've discussed from them up to this point at minimum have reached that level 4 mark. I think that's partly attributed to the way that the roaster likes their coffee, as well as the fact that it is on the lighter profile side of things in general. So level 4, yes, it interestingly was the best spot for this coffee for me as well. Florality, level 4. And I mentioned that there were times I found it to have some nice definition in terms of that honeysuckle-like sense. And given that there's a fair bit of honey in this one as well, it's interesting to me that it reaches that level 4 mark, given that the Kenyan coffee had a pretty similar quality to it. Level 4 nonetheless. We continue on to the berry fruit, level 4. And that, of course, is going to be those soft melon attributes that were present right from the onset on this one, and one of the most pronounced fruit profiles within this coffee that interestingly seemed to focus and offer a little bit more of the fruit profiles than I might have been expecting from it. Level 4, pretty nice fit for this one. Citrus fruit, also there at that level 4. And it's one of those things that I might not have necessarily discussed too much throughout this review, and it's because I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of citrus, but given that there was a pretty well-articulated lemon candy attribute in this one, I have to note it and have to give them credit for it, as it was possibly one of the most pronounced characteristics for the entirety of this one. Then we have a couple of level 3s. We will start with the stone fruit level 3. That's a little bit of a surprise to me, as I did not go into this one expecting too much of a peachy characteristic, but as a lot of people know, I'm a huge fan of peachiness in coffee, so anytime I'm able to get that, I enjoy the coffee in general a lot more than I might have expected. Level 3 is really nice for this one. Keramo, level 3, and that's of course going to be that candied aspect of this one, as there wasn't necessarily an abundance of brown candy, but a fair bit of candied attributes, most specifically in that lemon candy direction. But in addition to that, the sweetness did feel ever so slightly candied, so that's why it's there at that level 3 mark. Then we have the savoriness at a level 3, completely tea-like savoriness, as it's definitely had, I think they have an Earl Grey note list on here, makes sense, tea-like savoriness, but that's where all of that comes into play. And then the final thing we're discussing is the body at a level 2. And once again, making these coffees alongside each other, I was able to really pinpoint the difference in the texture and body with each of them. And I said, this one is definitely the lightest bodied. No surprises with that in any regard, as this one right here is a washed Ethiopian coffee, which was made with the Chemex. So of course, it was going to reach that level 2 mark, not necessarily too much texture to it. But as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. So when it came to that Kenyan coffee, I feel like it improved slightly from the first time I tried it towards the end. And when it came to the natural processed Ethiopian coffee, I feel like it went the other direction, as it slightly went down the longer we had it. This one right here, though, I feel like it had the biggest jump from the first time I tried it towards the end, as that's what I was hoping for from this one, as it offered many more of the fruit characteristics and components that I might have been looking for or expecting within this one. So that's a huge testament to them, and it does go to show that some of these coffees coffees, for me anyway, with the right adjustments, can improve significantly enough to the point where I enjoyed them maybe a little bit more than the other coffees that were featured from Banibeans that we're going to be discussing. So that's why this Ethiopian did definitely end up being one of my favorite coffees that we're discussing from them, and that of course is also attributed to the very strong fruit aspects within this one. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. It's interesting. Once again, I do want to highlight the brightness of it because that continues to be a theme with these Banibeans coffees that we're discussing, is that they continue to offer that, but kind of combine that with maybe a little bit more citric forward of a cup, because while I've downplayed that attribute of this one, it was definitely still present, though in a bit more sweet and candied of a sense, while still offering some other fruit components, most specifically that peachiness, which I continue to highlight and emphasize, given that it really did seem to set this coffee a little bit better apart from some of the other wash processed Ethiopian coffees we do discuss. Also, the melon attribute in this one is another thing that I might not have necessarily played up just how much I enjoyed that from this one. So abundance of fruit qualities highlighted by the citric components to it, as well as a fair bit of brightness. Best direction I can point somebody towards for this one, and the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. Enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Keramo wash processed Ethiopia from Banibeans Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.